The President's speech, Dr. Trevor Ngwane, who's an activist and the director of the Center for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Just really taking stock of what the President had to say. Of course, right at the forefront of this day, over the years, we've seen the bone of contention. Who does this day belong to? The PAC emphasizing a short while ago with my colleague Nqobile Madlala that the day belongs to the PAC and that, in actual fact, the main event being held is the one under the PAC and other political parties as opposed to the President's one. What's your take on this?
Thank you very much for having me. Of course, this is an old debate, but remember, things are coming to a head now because it's election season. So there'll be a lot of claims, a lot of political point scoring. But indeed, I think we should go back and ask the basic fundamental question. What did the Sharpeville people die for? And what have they gained from, their freedom from 30 years of ANC rule?
With that question, we know that the President spoke quite extensively about the changes that have been made over the past years, saying that over the 30 years, people's lives have indeed changed. But what we did here just a short while ago is Azapo saying that what has changed, what is to show for the sacrifices that have been made because people are still poor, the unemployment levels are still high, and that people are still using pit latrines. What did you take out? What was the main takeout from the President's speech?
Yeah, I think that the ANC and the President, have got a problem because whatever they achieved was undermined by all the negatives. So, something, which is petty, but twice during his address, the power went away and he had to stop and wait for the generators to be boosted, which means that in Sharpeville today, on Human Rights Day, there was load shedding or a big power failure. So basically, the ANC has wasted 30 years. They've, engaged in what I can call squandered political opportunities. So now I think Raposa wishes that he had become president 20 years ago. He wishes that someone like the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, who is busy with his, let's call it, vote-catching gimmicks, doing things quickly and for the media dramatically. This should have happened a while ago because at the moment it does look like it's too little, too late. So many bad things have happened, corruption, the continuation of exploitation, that whatever the ANC says, is fighting against that lived reality of the masses of the people.
In fact, we heard the President yesterday at the Black Industrialist event talking about what you're touching on and also mentioning it again today when it comes to the issue of load shedding, say that many people were load shed permanently under apartheid and that today, they know that it will come to an end because there's a clear plan. But, of course, making mention of what happened at the start with the generators needing to kick in. But the other matter that also came up is the President speaking about the social relief of distress grant increasing the 350 rand. But, of course, failing to talk about how much of an increase was that, because we know that unions like SAFTU have criticized it, saying that it's an insult to the poor.
Yes, well, remember that we had the mass looting of July 2021. And the reason for that was that the government had decided not to continue with that grant, that SRP grant. So after that, there was no choice but to reinstate it. So clearly, this is a reluctant government. It only does what is good for the poor when there is a problem for it. It only does for the poor when there is a problem of an election coming up, when there is a problem of mass unrest. it didn't of itself think, hey, the people are suffering. Really, there's a lot of unemployment. Let's continue with the grant. Even now, the ANC is thinking of increasing the grant. And as you state, vaguely not coming up with a figure because the elections are coming. That's not the kind of government the people want. They want a government on their side which is empathetic, sympathetic, and does everything to actually have them improve their lives.
Yeah, and that increase is a 20 Rand increase from 350 Rand to 370 Rand in April, but he didn't make mention of it. He just spoke about how the grant still continues. But we also know that he spoke about the elections, reminding South Africans that come the 29th of May, it's a good opportunity to exercise one's right to vote. In fact, we heard Ace Magashule a short while ago saying that people are unhappy with the ANC and that, in fact, the ANC is not visible as it should be on the ground ahead of elections.
Yeah, well, the ANC was born as a nationalist movement, and nationalist movements of national liberation, their priority is to get the land back. Their priority is to get the economy back into the hands of the indigenous people or the native population. Now, the ANC has failed dramatically on that score. I mean, Raposa himself is an example. He is a billionaire. Why? Because white monopoly capital made a deal. They said, we'll give a few of you, allow you to be millionaires, billionaires, but for the rest of the population, for the mass of the working class, they will continue suffering, capitalist exploitation. That is exactly what has happened. And the ANC cannot sort this out in the next 2 months before the elections. So really, I would say that the president, obviously, there's a lot which the ANC achieved, but the president is engaged in a process of rewriting history. I think it was the Azapo comrade who said that. They are now trying to say that the people of Sharpeville died in order for South Africa to have international economic competitiveness, to allow the bosses to invest and make profits and to continue with the exploitation of labor. I think people had a bigger vision, which is why they were prepared to die.
Yeah. Perhaps substantiate a little bit on what you're saying about President Ramaphosa and how he has benefited through business. I mean, he spoke today about how the government doesn't discriminate based on one's race, based on one's class. Give us more detail around that.
Yeah, so apartheid, to be honest, was born of colonialism, in particular of capitalism. So the apartheid system was what we can call racial capitalism. So the capitalists, Oppenheimer, his father, Ernest, and them, they were using race to ensure a cheap supply of black labor. And then in 1922, the white working class fought back, in one of the greatest strikes. And then the bosses decided, let us pull the white workers to our side. So they created this apartheid system where the blacks were nothing and whites were everything. So when the day of reckoning came, when the revolutionary rumblings in the country in the 80s, 70s came, the white monopoly capital made a deal and said, okay, we will allow a few of you, especially members of the ANC top leadership in the NWC, National Working Committee, to become millionaires, billionaires, BEE, Black Economic Empowerment. But make sure that the miners continue to go down digging gold for us. Make sure that the workers continue in the factories making money for us. So that was the deal. That is how we had Mutsipe, Sikwale, Ramaphosa, Sakima Xozomo becoming billionaires, BEE. But that didn't work because the workers could see that they continue being exploited. So one of the problems which President Thabo Mbeki made, he made it clear to the Communist Party, to the Congress of South African Trade Unions, that he would continue siding with the bosses. Now, in Marikana 2012, the ANC again showed its true colors. It was prepared to kill miners who were fighting against the black cheap labor system. Indeed, Lonmin, the company, the strike of Marikana was against. Raposa himself was a shareholder. He was a chairperson, a director in their board. This shows that Raposa and the ANC, they are all part of perpetuating the system of the exploitation of cheap black labor.
Yeah, very well. Dr. Trevor Ngwane from the University of Johannesburg analyzing there and just picking up on some of the highlights of the President's address this Human Rights Day. We do continue to bring you more news in just a moment. Stay with us.